Good morning, cellists. Here we are in the third lesson on the G major prelude, and today we're going to have 3 left-hand technical warm-ups, but no specific bow exercise today, although obviously you can take any of the bow exercises we've previously done and work on those. So I propose today that you might reacquaint yourself with a chromatic scale starting on G. Just 2 octaves, and this is going to really be a preparatory for us for the last quarter of the prelude. There will be so much to fit in that last quarter. I think a little bit of preparation for that would be helpful so we can spread the weight. So a reminder of the chromatic: we don't use the 4th finger unless it's expedient for the final top note, the turnaround note, which in this case it will be, because we will be able to use the little finger for the G there. Obviously if you're going into another octave we would put a 1st finger on that G and we would keep going and then use the 4th finger at the top if you were doing 3 octaves of this chromatic. Again, basic reminder, so we've got open strings and the fingers 1, 2 and 3, which we use twice over, once in half position and then in upper second. Now commonly what occurs here is that one can end up typically underestimating the intervals. Keep a nice wide separation between the fingers in half position, and on the way up in the 2nd position the 2nd finger will always be on a resonating note, and here I am on a C, which you can check with open C. Use your elbow to go back into half position, remembering those fingers are nice and wide apart. Moving again to check the G on the 2nd finger. So you can see I checked the G and the C on the way up there. Sometimes what occurs is the intervals, one feels nervous and you could have the fingers a little bit too close together, in which case you'll hear a huge gap before the open string, and that will give you an indication that something's not right. Another possibility is you overshoot, where you're almost on the C with your 1st finger. You don't like the fact that it's not really a note, and you may find yourself pushing to the floor to make it a resonant C, and obviously neither of those are quite right. Hence I'm just drawing your attention to focusing on that 2nd finger, resonating. That's the one you're really aiming at to make sure that you're in the right spot, both on the ascent and descent. So let's just try it, separate bows, just checking those notes. At this point, as you come down, it's quite common, having been close together with the fingers here, relatively close here, you don't open wide enough in the half position. And it would be a real telltale if this note's correct, but if the fingers are too close, you'll hear too big a gap before the open A, which will make the A sound wrong. You can hear that's the wrong interval. So a good trick with this is just to push your 1st finger back. If it's too much, you'll get away with it. A small semitone here is acceptable to the ear, a wide one is not. So from the top, you can check the D. Now at this point, to move to this G sharp, quite often that's a tricky moment. If you worry about it, you'll probably find you drop your arm and you won't go far enough. Keep the arm raised, way back to half, open the fingers, lift your arm to get to C sharp, check the C, there we have it. So there's a few technical tips on the way there. The checking of the resonant notes as you go up and down, and the typically opening out the finger distances in the half position, and keeping the arm raised so that you can easily move into the upper second as you cross the strings. Usually chromatics are actually better played a little on the quick side. If you play too slowly, your ear cannot check exactly if you're in the right place or not, and that you know, the finesse of those semitones can seem quite hard to gauge if they're right or wrong. So don't go too slowly. The other thing I think would be useful is to get in a full slur for the octave. Now, before you do that, check that you check out the G's and which finger they're on, so that your brain knows only those moments to focus on. So I'll have a second finger on this G, a fourth on the top. And when you're then doing all your notes in the octave, if you just know the change point, that's all you'll need to know, because everything else should be pretty automatic. So my mind only has to know about when to change the bow, and the left hand can just get on with it. So this will stand you in good stead in preparation for bars 37, 38 of the Prelude, which we'll look at in the next lesson. Moving on. The other two little technical things today are, yes, another diminished seventh, although it's not really, it's just the same as yesterday, starting on a different note. So yesterday we started on C, and today I propose we start on the E flat. You can hear the same notes. You can hear that they are the same chord. We're just starting in a different place. By starting on the E flat with second finger, move to first finger on F sharp, then we do the crab crawl, which is a displaced semitone, close, displaced semitone, close, displaced semitone, and close. Same back, stretch a displaced semitone, close the hand, rotate and stretch, close, rotate and stretch, close, back to first. And that this, the top of that will be a preparation for the end of bar 23 to 24. So that's got its immediate direct relevance as to why we're picking that one, because in that solution we're getting to the exact right position for the E flat with fourth finger, which we'll look at in a short while. The other item I wanted to offer you today was just a single octave of an A7 chord. So this is A major, but we'll add in the seventh, which is G natural. Don't forget to arrive on the resolution note of D. So we're looking at that because A is the dominant of D, which is the dominant of G. And as we know, Bach loves that relationship, and this prelude really hammers that home, or it will be in the final quarter, where we get a very extended A pedal note, which is the dominant of the dominant. And then we move to a D pedal note, which is the dominant of our tonic, our keynote G. More on that in the next lesson. The dominant seventh I've just shown you is to help us in particular with bar 27, which is all A7 in that particular bar, and very commonly one doesn't get the stretch quite enough on the C sharp. Keep it nice and high so that it's really pushing the ear towards that D. So there's your technical digest for today then. One chromatic, a diminished seventh, different version of yesterday's, and A7. Okay, let's move to Feuillard study number 38, and today we're going to look at line 3 and half of line 4. So that's bars 9 to 14. Bar 9 begins in exactly the same pattern as the opening, but just on a different string. So that's quite nice for the mind. You've already got the feeling in your fingertips. And remember, the study itself, we're looking at this strong pinches at the point. So you should be getting a very nice strong little finger here. So what we have so far. So in terms of bar 9, that was G minor, bar 10, G major. And now, guess what? A diminished. So those those two bars are the same diminished chord, and they fall in line exactly with the line above where you had something very similar. It's exactly the same geographic shape, just on the next string, on the G string. So very familiar to the left hand. The only thing to bear in mind is a bit more rotation to be really above the string. Bearing in mind you're past halfway on the fingerboard there. So that's line 3 pretty much done. Line 4 we resolve with the second finger in half position on the A, which is a D minor chord, and we go back to a B flat, which is a B flat major, and then we'll resolve on an A, which will be part of D minor again. This has got a really quite an elegant harmonic move to it, if you just hear that. Just by changing one note, A to B flat, we're moving from one chord to another, D minor to B flat major. Again, the same as we've tried out with the first half of this study. Let's try the bowings. I gave you that bow exercise yesterday, and we applied it between the A and the D and A strings in the first half of this study. And now here's your chance to try it on the G string. There it is with the slurs, and when we add the slurs you can really hear the line moving up and down with that pedal D coming in there. All of this excellent preparation for Bach for the final quarter of the Prelude. So enjoy your explorations with the Feuillard. Now let's continue the story with the Prelude. We've arrived at this dominant pause note. And as I said yesterday, yes, get to the very point. Hold the suspense, rotate the arm onto the G string there, which means a little bit of rotation here as well. And we're now going to put 9 notes in a bow. And what's happening here is we keep on rising and rising and rising. So the next is 7 notes. Is it 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Beg your pardon. So we had 9, we had 8, and then we have 6. The idea is that we are moving up a broken chord here. Ooh. There is the diminished seventh that I have given you for today's lesson, which is being broken down, so we're rising up to each note of that chord. Those represent the top notes of these scales. Listen again. And you can really, I hope, hear this diminished seventh hiding in those scale shapes. And the idea of doing 9 and then 8 and then 6 notes per bow is that we're impacting this rise, we're really making it dramatic. In order to do this, of course, you'll need to be flat hair, a lot of power and strength at the beginning of this, even though we're not going to be a loud dynamic. So just let me just think of that again. And when we get to the top notes, we want to allow an extra bit of bow so that we really properly arrive. You can see a faster bow stroke at the top. Now for the E flat, we allow ourselves to change bow, and we're going to have 4 notes in that bow. Now this is a wonderful chromatic embellishment of the D. And then we swap fingers, finger substitution. We're turning it into a lovely D7, dominant 7th. All of this is D7. Now Now at the end of this bar, it's beautiful. It's the second voice making its assertion here. So we're demonstrating that with its own bowing. 3 notes arriving here. And at the end of 25 we'll do similarly on a G chord. And that those voices, we really want them to come out. So we have from 24. Then guess what? Ooh, we have moved to the C sharp. Now yesterday we also demonstrated the same 2 notes when we talked about arriving at that low C sharp at bar 20. I have to put in a tiny little correction. I said after I played this, I said to you diminished 7th. It's part of a diminished 7th chord, but it's actually of course a diminished 5th, the actual interval. And here we have it again in the middle of bar 26. How dramatic is that? And it's so instantaneous, it's extremely thrilling. After this, with all these chromatics again, this time embellishing the A, which is the dominant of the dominant. You know, this is all really, really relevant in our understanding of how you can really create the tensions here and what's happening. You know, it's really beautiful embellishment of the A. Preparing us for A7. There's your A7 or dominant 7th in arpeggio, which I gave you at the beginning of the class today. And so there you can see how it's leading into it. So bar 25 is a D7 chord. Bar 26 is G, and then gets to being chromatically embellishing around an A, leading into bar 27, an A7 chord, and it rightly resolves on D in bar 28. So we've had from bar 27 and it really, really sits very, very firmly in D major there, with a lovely descending D major scale, with a lovely raised C sharp, keep it nice and high. That's definitely a point of a peak, you know, as if we've got to a really super viewpoint at the beginning of 28. Now moving on, we now have some lovely cascading falling scales. Immediately we've arrived at this D, having had these C sharps that I've mentioned, straight away plays C natural. Yes, it's D7 coming in to say, no, we're going straight back to feeling that we really belong to G major. Wants to arrive, G major. Not for a while yet, a lot of story to get through. So we have falling scales, they're really all part of G major scales, so you could always experiment with doing lots of descending G major scales. These are all part of G major, just from different points in the scale. So from 29, the C natural. Here we have a lovely rising 7ths. So we have absolutely glorious. Don't miss those. What can easily happen is you see the scale falling, and you take them independently as little segments, but be careful, because the beauty is between the end of one scale and the beginning of the next. As we saw in which lesson was it? Lesson 17, the last lesson on the Allemande, we had the falling 7ths, and this time we have rising 7ths instead, same ones. And in these, the one that's the most thrilling, in my opinion, is the major 7th. Because we really so much want this to resolve, but it's an absolutely fantastic way to create tension. So as you descend these scales, make sure with the bow press the string, you know, feel that curvature in your arm movement. We definitely want to feel a real connection, an audible connection between them, as if you're reluctant to leave it. Be careful we don't end up with a snatch. We don't want to have no snatching. Make it really, really tactile and connected to each of those falling scales. They're almost like waterfall cascades, you know, really beautiful. So that's what we have really today. So going from 22, where we take up the story, story until tomorrow, when we've got a lot to pack in with regard to string crossing and broken chords and managing a very long final chord. Plenty of tricks to come. Take care, see you tomorrow.